I would actually say that you really have to go beyond just digital to make the impact. I mean, digital ads in general are essentially just digital billboards. And if you're trying to sell $1 million deal, no one's going to click on an ad and then give them their credit card to make that happen. So, I wish I could talk to the impact of this campaign, but I'll share one idea that we had. And I think that this is like a really great example of the type of impact that you can make from a really sort of just a strong investment in a personalized experience. And really this idea we called the Trojan Horse campaign. And what it was just imagine you have an account that has a specialized product that the whole company's all revolved around. They think it's the best product ever. So what you do is you go and create a custom pinata of that product and you send it to their office.
Hey, I'm Corrina.
And I'm Taylor.
And this is Direct, a podcast we created to showcase the creativity and hard work of go-to-market teams everywhere.
We're here to share the stories and experiences of the hardworking, passionate individuals who make up go-to-market teams, the ones who truly make the magic happen.
Taylor and I have been fortunate enough to work side by side on some incredible projects together, and now we want to put a spotlight on the unsung heroes behind some of the best go-to-market campaigns out there.
In each episode, you'll hear from individual contributors who have gone above and beyond to make a difference. They'll share their challenges, victories, and the lessons they've learned along the way, all to help you unlock the next step in your career. Get ready to be inspired, learn something new, maybe even share a laugh or two.
Welcome to Direct. Welcome back to another episode of Direct with Corrina and Taylor. I'm Corrina.
And I'm Taylor.
And today we're joined by Richard Grant. Richard is an account-based manager at ITJ. Before diving into the world of ABM, Richard was actually a DJ and a music producer. So, Richard, I'm curious, what was your DJ name?
I've gone by quite a few. The most recent would be Beacons. And then after that, I didn't actually have a name for quite a bit of time. I was actually just producing music for other artists, which is kind of fun because you just get to kind of do what I'm doing right now, which is work from the office.
To catch your music on Spotify, would we be able to?
Ooh,
SoundCloud?
I haven't paid those costs to keep it live in quite a few years, so I don't know if the music's still up.
Okay, well, we'll have to find a way to get a snippet of that. That's just so cool. Hopefully, we can get into some interesting things here with ABM, but we could obviously talk about your DJ career forever, too.
Lots of great stories.
So, Richard, as you know, we ask all of our guests one question at the top, and that question is, if you had a magic wand and you could change any aspect about your career, your job, your personal life, what would you use that magic wand and why?
Yeah, so if I could have a magic wand and change like one thing, it would honestly be, and this is very marketing focused, but to create like a mind reading tool. I'm sure you guys have maybe heard this before or have had it thrown around before, but just like a little backstory. So in my first role as like an account-based marketing manager, I was also in operations. And most of my day-to-day was really operations, probably about like a 75-25 split. And what I really love about marketing isn't necessarily like report building or optimizing processes. It's honestly just like making an impact. And the more personalized the outreach with the right person at the right time, the more impact you can really have. And then seeing over like several years of transformation, how that impact turns into something that impacts not only like hundreds of thousands or millions of people. I mean, that's truly what makes working in this field worth it for me. So anyway, like the mind reading tool, like essentially just be, something that like has the power to instantly know what your prospects, what their needs are, understand their specific pain points and are able to really identify all the key stakeholders like involved in that buying decision. And I think that maybe there's some marketers that are like patting themselves on the back as I explain this, is because maybe they feel like their internal systems act this way. But really for us in the trenches of like a scrappy resource constrained ABM program, obtaining high quality data is really a significant challenge. And reliable data can be not only like hard to find and expensive to acquire. And we often like operate with limited resources, really trying to like strive to piece together insights from disparate sources to form a coherent understanding of those target accounts. And a tool like this would allow us to focus those efforts on high value activities, such as creating compelling content and nurturing meaningful relationships with our prospects, which is why I love ABM and marketing in general.
Well, that's incredible. And we are excited to start talking to you about that scrappy ABM program that you were talking about. So without the mind reading tool that we've got so far, talk to us and tell our listeners a little bit about the specific campaign that you've been running through ABM. I heard from you that you've done some really great things with like a one to few strategy due to like the limited resources that you've had available and had some really great success with those. Could you set the stage for that one to few ABM program you're running?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of interesting. I think most organizations, if you join as an ABMer, you're really coming in to build one-to-one. At least most other ABMers I've talked to. In our case, we were really building from the ground up. We didn't necessarily have data to work with. There was very limited content to work with as well. And I think we also faced some challenges on the leadership side in that they didn't quite understand what account-based marketing was. And internally, it was like, okay, well, now that we've turned the switch on for ABM, where's the leads? And this is like certainly a common challenge. Getting that internal buy-in, internally understanding, what are the key objectives and what ABM drives. And what we did with account-based marketing really out the gate was, okay, we need to be able to build something that's not only scalable, but operationally like functional right out the gate, being that, we really had like a two-month runway, kind of build the plane as we're flying it. The first strategy was really those one to few campaigns because it added the layer of personalization, but it was also somewhat scalable to reach the target accounts. At this time, like as I'm building this ABM program from the ground up, I didn't necessarily have the industry breadth to quite understand the target accounts as much as I would have liked to. Spending so much time actually building the assets and really relied on sales to provide what would be the target accounts for these campaigns. One big thing that, like looking back, that I wish I would have done differently is we had first ran our segmentation for these one to few based on the segmentation that was in our CRM. That made sense for the CRM at the time, but it didn't make sense for ABM. And it made personalization really difficult. And it certainly wasn't as impactful. So, of course, that was a setback. But after a month or two of kind of recognizing that in the data, we really changed gears, created 3 one to few campaigns, spinning up, it must have been like 108 different landing pages, different ad sets, tons of different pieces of content for top, middle, and bottom of funnel. And I will also say that if you're in a position like me, like where you're having really limited resources and you need content, repurposing old content is super helpful as a way to kind of like jump forward off of the kind of piggybacking the stuff you already have. But yeah, I mean, really what we learned was sub-industry segmentation was a really easy way for us to reach our target audiences in a unique way, particularly because when we think about what our target audience needed, it differed a lot by sub-industry, and we could really speak directly to that. And our market really is only US based. And as far as US companies and sub-industry, we could really kind of hone in that key messaging.
Can you tell us a little bit, not to get too deep into like a whole pitch, but a little bit about what those personas are that you were going after and how you decided that it would be, more effective to go into not just the top level industry, but the sub-industry as well? Because I think it's a little bit unique. A lot of ABMers will start with industry. I think it's more unique to get down into that sub-industry and have a really differentiated message for the sub-industry. So I'm curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, well, for us, like we really considered ourselves, especially on like the engineering side, as sort of a niche option for life sciences. And life sciences in general, pharmaceutical, medical devices, healthcare providers, healthcare research institutions, they all kind of like have different needs, particularly with our offering, which is software. And those needs also combine with the pain points. So when we thought about segmenting, it really started at like, okay, who are the accounts that, and I honestly think this was like the wrong approach to start. And we fixed this over time, which is like, who do we want to win? We didn't really have the data to say anything outside of just who do we want to win, other than maybe some intent data from our providers. And from there, we were like, okay, well, here's the 3 different types of segmentations that we can build off of sub-industry. And to answer your question about the types of personas, mostly like C level, some director level and above, VP level, particularly like technology, software engineering. And then the bread and butter really is research and development. So kind of an interesting target persona. And a lot of them, as we've kind of found, that they're not the type of people that really want to give their information up. So a classic MQL model really isn't going to work. But if you really want to build like trust, credibility, and start a relationship with these folks, particularly at the top of the funnel, something like ABM really does work. And we've really seen that the effectiveness at the top of the funnel of ABM, that's been like a big win for us.
Talk to us a little bit more about how you attracted the C-level. I think that that's the holy grail for anybody that's, it's especially with software, they want to reach the top of the top. What were some of the different tactics or even enablement on your team broadly that you deployed to kind of successfully garner their attention?
Yeah, we found LinkedIn to work better. And that's also just because tracking at a persona level is better than our current ABM tool. But with LinkedIn ads and really just targeting, whether it be a target account list or doing contact-based match advertising through there, we can hone in on ensuring we're reaching the right audience, but then really having craftful messaging around what was the type of content and the type of messaging that was going to resonate with that audience. And that really started with, one, talking to our engineering team to understand really from their perspective on the ground, what do they hear? And then bringing our sales team in, looping them in to understand what are the types of questions that they get asked all the time. And then working with, I have an excellent copywriter who's able to support us and having them kind of craft some awesome messaging that would be able to resonate. And it's overall like relatively simple, but at the same time, from like an operations standpoint, relatively simple. But I think it was more so difficult just in ensuring that we had the right messaging and testing that, running different types of ad sets and ensuring which ones are actually garnering that audience, and then just replicating that and scaling it across different accounts.
How did you afford the time to do something like an A/B test? Because that I think is really crucial, right? And I think with strategies like ABM, we can take some time to show results, especially if you have a much longer sales cycle, say like a couple of quarters or so. How did you kind of set the expectations with your smaller team of, hey, we're going to deploy these LinkedIn ads. We're then going to test these different copies and image variables, but we're going to need, X amount of time to be able to see anything that's really viable for us to take action off of?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think we really had an option because we really didn't have any data starting off. So a lot of what we were doing right out the first couple months was a little bit of like a finger in the air, trying to figure out which direction to go and relying on a lot of internal resources to kind of point us in that right direction. And without having real data to back up strategical decisions moving forward, we really would have just continued down that path. So I think that was probably it was honestly just a necessity. Yes, limited resources, twice as much work, but it's guided us down a path of success moving forward versus continuing down a path of guesswork.
That's such an interesting perspective, especially about, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are feeling kind of the same, that if they're starting down a new avenue, that maybe they don't have the data to help them, especially if they've not done a ton of content or account-based in the past, not having a lot of data. You said one thing that I really picked up on earlier, which is you had intent, but you didn't really have an ICP. And so that was a mistake that you made early on that you corrected and then started working better toward your ideal customers instead of just listening for that intent signal. Can you talk a little bit more about how you corrected that and what research or data you were able to figure out to make sure you were honing in on best fit customers instead of just anyone who maybe was showing some intent?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think intent overall was a bit of a letdown early on, particularly because a lot of our accounts were so enterprise that the intent really was every week, high intent for our services and kind of spread out across general locations in the US. And the more intent there is at those large organizations, kind of the less reliable it becomes. So I don't know, in that sense, it really just was useless. But I started to come up with a new system for really internalizing our data and creating like a qualification system around all of our target accounts. And that was a combination of, do we have like a relationship with anybody in that company so far? Is anyone aware of us or can champion us on the inside? And then on the outside of that was like, is there anyone there actually engaged with sales? Does sales have somewhat of an in, a foot in, even if it's just like an engagement, whether it be like email opens, email links, and then combining that on the marketing side, is this an account that's clicking on our ads? Where are they in that buyer's journey funnel? And are we able to actually spend money to reach them too? I think there's some accounts that we've gone after in the past where we've wanted them to be target accounts, but we've really struggled with actually reaching the right people at those accounts. And at that point, it doesn't actually make sense to include them in ABM. We end up spending too much money and we don't get the click-throughs, or we don't get any sort of engagement as a result of it. So just combining all of those different data points helped us get a better picture of not only who's going to be engaged with us and who's going to continue to engage with us, and of course, we're mixing that with firmographics and demographics and the things that normally are ICP fit. But it's just like that extra layer of assurance to ensure that the accounts we're going after, we could actually win. I would actually say that you really have to go beyond just digital to make the impact. I mean, digital ads in general are essentially just digital billboards. And if you're trying to sell $1 million deal, no one's going to click on an ad and then give them their credit card to make that happen. So, I wish I could talk to the impact of this campaign, but I'll share one idea that we had. And I think that this is like a really great example of the type of impact that you can make from a really sort of just a strong investment in a personalized experience. And really this idea we called the Trojan Horse campaign. And what it was just imagine you have an account that has a specialized product that the whole company's all revolved around. They think it's the best product ever. So what you do is you go and create a custom pinata of that product and you send it to their office. And inside that pinata could be handwritten notes from your team. It could be handwritten notes to specific people at that company. It could have a QR code that links to a direct landing page for tracking to make sure, that they actually open the pinata. But the impact could go way further than that in the sense that they could take pictures with it, post it on their LinkedIn. They could express a huge thanks and spread that across their network. And then, of course, you could include additional things like you could have a custom bat with their logo on it and their colors, and then give them custom blindfolds or essentially, bandanas. And, to caveat that, like, of course, you need to know a lot about the account to do this. I don't think it's a good idea to do this if A, you don't know anything about that account, or B, the account isn't engaged with you at all. And I think the last thing you want to do is try to scale something like that to the point where you're doing it across all of your target accounts. It really needs to be something that's like kind of special, really thought through. Ideally, you have someone internally that can confirm that those people actually work in office and that you're going to actually reach the right people versus it landing in an office full of a bunch of lawyers where you're trying to reach CTOs. So something like that, I think, would be like a great example of the type of campaign you might need to pull off to really bridge that gap between digital and physical and create something that's lasting and memorable.
I don't think enough companies deploy things like that. I think that we're always trying to, get automation to work in our favor so we can do everything at scale. But to your point, it's really not going to land the same way if it's overly automated in any sort of fashion, right? If it's just plug and play template here. So having to be super unique and marrying what you said too, digital channels with offline channels is really important. And I think really the only way you can break through the noise.
Yeah. And I would love to, I'd love to say that we had a recorded impact of that. Maybe it's something we do in the near future when we have some more resources. And if there's anybody who's listening that goes out and tries it and they reach out to me and they're like, hey, it worked and it's awesome, then I'd love to hear that as well. But I don't think it needs to be necessarily that. I think it's just the idea of doing something that makes that lasting memorable impact. And it could depend on your customer too. What do they care about? I think that's the starting trigger.
So speaking of like limited resources and coming from a small team, it sounds like you've had to really prioritize what you could do at scale with trying to make this memorable, trying to do real personalization instead of just a lot of copy paste and tokens. Can you speak to our listeners a little bit about how you've had to make tough decisions about what you would do with a scrappy ABM team?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's kind of funny, but I think about like an acronym that I put together called Perfect, and it's so far from perfect, but really it's personalization done at scale, efficiency. So like really leveraging the data that you do have to make smart decisions, resourcefulness. Like we use a bunch of free tools, like shout out retention B2B. I mean, it gives us some first party data, like anything that's free, we try to use it, especially if it creates some sort of impact. And then F would be like just focus on high impact activities. So like scrappy ABM prioritizes like activities that really just deliver the most impact. And then the other E would be efficacy, which is really just being able to be agile. So not building something that you can't break down or change quickly. I think that that's super important. If you're building anything, you should be able to quickly be able to interchange parts of it to be able to make the right adjustments to ensure your success moving forward. Creativity, thinking outside the box, creating those personalized moments, incorporating like guerrilla marketing tactics, going above and beyond. And then T would be like teamwork. And that's probably the most important because you really can't do it on your own. And you certainly can't close the deals on your own as a marketer, not in the B2B space. So like at least identifying some key champions on your sales team and working really close with them, having those one-on-ones to understand where they are in process with specific accounts, what are the pain points that they have, and how can we as a marketer show up best for them.
That's such a great framework. I really love activities being on there. How did you identify what those high impact activities would be that you and your team could focus on?
It was a little bit of a finger in the air kind of thing based on, some interpretations or just having really good brainstorming sessions as a team to come up with some awesome ideas, leveraging what little data we did have to say, hey, this is actually working significantly. Hey, look at this account, like the click-through rate's crazy on this messaging. Maybe that's something that we can like adapt across a different industry. Yeah, we definitely flopped early on with some copy, but we also had some copy that really delivered and we saw some amazing engagement with, particularly like the top of the funnel, which early on, I think we really tried to win bottom of funnel first, try to catch some low hanging fruit. But the reality was a lot of these target accounts had never heard of us before, had never been on our website. And we really had to start at that top. And when it came to crafting copy, it was really the combination of things like AI tools and then just being really smart, having a good internal resource around copywriting. I like to think of myself as a relatively good copywriter, but then when I see a copywriter who does it for a living actually work with what I've given them, it puts it to shame. So having the right resources around ensuring that we're putting the right copy in place and then thinking about it from the perspective of our prospects, really trying to put ourselves in their shoes. And if they were reading that messaging, would that really be something they're interested in? Or are we just doing marketing for the sake of marketing to really just shove stuff in front of people's faces?
Yeah, it sounds like if I could take a guess, you probably were championing your prospects as like the hero of the story, right? Like just like you talked about the Trojan horse example, it sounds like you kind of went away from why your company is so awesome. Here are the amazing results we can deliver and went more to like, okay, what would I as a said buyer want to hear so I could feel seen in these different ads?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because as a marketer early on, I read that StoryBrand book, which really is all about that, which is like positioning your customer as the hero. And that really resonated with me as a young marketer. And now I still think back to that all the time. And one of our big challenges really was our website. And it's still something that we're trying to overcome. And that's really because our content and our website and the content that lives on our website feels a lot like us puffing our chests out. It's a lot of ITJ-centric content, which isn't always the worst thing depending upon the page. Some people do want to hear about us depending upon where they click. But we really do have to position ourselves as sort of a supporting function and understand that our customers are the heroes and we're there to drive them to success. So I'm glad you brought that up. And it's something we certainly have had to make a lot of adjustments around. And we've seen an amazing impact as a result of shifting our messaging away from that internal focus to a prospect focus, in the sense of like, what do they actually care about? I don't think they actually care about our internal mission until it actually affects their pain points.
That is a really powerful statement that I think is going to resonate with a lot of our listeners. And I know that the clients that I work with for ABM, sometimes they'll have an abundance of content, but like you're saying, it's all about me content. It's very sales heavy, and it's not so much in that thought leadership realm. So I'm curious how you got buy-in to get this perspective where you're shifting the content to higher top funnel. You're getting a little bit more thought leadership. You're trying to convince people not just to talk about themselves on your site all of the time. How'd you get buy-in to put resources higher in the funnel that way?
Well, one of the amazing things about working at a really small startup is sometimes you don't need buy-in. You can just go do stuff. So that's definitely part of it. But we are trying to really work in some buy-in right now, particularly with a remodel and reconstruction of our website. And honestly, it's tough. I'd say the toughest thing about it is that different departments have a different view of what our company is, who our ICP is, and what our company is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's actually been a really amazing process as we worked on the website, as we come together to really form a unanimous, unified decision around really what that is. And being that our overall business wants to become $100 million, maybe $1 billion business further down the road, we really need to step outside of this niche of what our customer currently is and think about what our customer could be, and crafting our messaging to make sure that we meet those expectations and that we can deliver as a $100 million, $1 billion company.
You're describing a really great benefit of ABM, which is it's not always about the immediate external metrics, impacts like, close ARR, decrease sales velocity, et cetera. Sometimes it's about helping the company figure out what is their overall positioning, where are they headed, where should they invest their time and energy and resources. So I think that that's actually a really great thing that you can actually walk away with by saying, hey, we achieved X, Y, and Z results that we anticipated to achieve for pipeline, et cetera. But we've also actually unified the messaging internally about how we're going to position ourselves in the market.
Yeah, it's funny we've gotten this far in this conversation without talking about pipeline velocity or ARR, but yeah, obviously those are like the most important things, but you really can't get there without thinking about everything else. And if you hyper focus on the end goals without thinking about all the things that lead you there, it's really hard to get there. So glad we've been able to kind of wrap the conversation around some of the stuff that leads to that path.
So speaking of, I love that we were just wrapping on not metrics, but I want to give you the opportunity, Richard, to give us a little bit of the metrics. I know it's earlier on and your sales cycle is probably a lot longer, so maybe it's not all the way to revenue, but what are some of those early insights of this one to few program that you want to highlight for our listeners?
Yeah, we have year-long to 2-year-long sales cycles. It takes sometimes just a year just to get us on a vendor approved list. This ABM program's been running for about 9 months. So to say, hey, we have a ton of influence pipeline turn revenue, which wouldn't be the case. However, what we've seen is some target accounts that have turned into open opportunities where 100% of our web traffic is dedicated to ABM. And we get just like amazing engagement as a result of that. And really what we're able to do is lock in with things like different channels, but like different paid channels like LinkedIn or our ABM platform. We can really see who those people are that are actually clicking on it at the demographic level, like job function, or whether it be like sub-industry and essentially, being able to measure that impact, particularly just from an engagement standpoint, to say that these opportunities have really converted into open opportunities. open opportunities have been converted into actual real pipeline or revenue. Yeah, it's just powerful. I mean, it definitely speaks to the quality of ABM, particularly like the top of the funnel, and making sure you're actually reaching the right accounts and having a higher level of impact versus really spreading that message wide across a much wider target.
Yeah. And I can really appreciate that you're saying that. For our listeners, a lot of people, ABM should be tied to business growth ultimately, which is pipeline and revenue. But we also have to understand that when the challenge is brand awareness, when you have such a long sales cycle, your first year in ABM could be target account engagement. And that's not a bad thing. That's something that the expectation should be set early on. And you should be excited about and celebrating the engagement on your site and with your brand, and getting into some sales conversations early on with that ABM program. So I'm actually really excited that you went into that direction with that answer.
Yeah, and we certainly had some challenges there too, getting buy-in across the organization, which also includes, sales engagement in that process. You really have to teach people how to use data differently, because the way that engagement happens or that impact that you're making is converted into data. And then that data goes into the hands of the sales team, and they need to actually know how to use that data. And our team's getting way better at it now. And we have some awesome new salespeople who have really just they already have that mindset. They know that it's all about building those personalized experiences and building those relationships. So I'm really excited about the future of where we're headed with this program. But of course, those first few months, when I think back to those long nights and long days of working and creating tons of different assets, and then seeing accounts that reach amazing progression, but then start to fall back and regress, and there's just not the activity or the follow-up in place. Now we're getting to a place now where there's really something that's defined to help push past just the digital engagement.
Yeah, and hearing you started kind of saying maybe you don't have results yet, or it's not mature enough yet, but you actually sound like you have a pretty mature process here for ABM. I think many people equate ABM with what you kind of just talked about a little bit, which is digital signals or pushing a digital message. But you really understood a lot of the psyche around your buyers and how to best target them, attract them, and then what is the follow through that your entire organization, like your sales organization, needs to do to pair it with that. So I feel like your magic wand is actually something that is near close to done. I feel like you have done a really good job of collecting all that data about what copy is resonating, what channels are working best, who is actually the ICP fit, instead of just going off of what a bunch of other intent providers are telling you is your ICP fit. So to me, it's almost like you could use AI as your friend here a little bit and collect and synthesize all of that data that you've gotten to then be that mind reading prediction a bit to say, hey, we know if we're doing X, Y, and Z channels with this messaging, we're going to probably get to, X% pipeline in X months or whatever. You really seem like you have actually a pretty thorough process with that. So yeah, I just want to give you kudos, because it sounds like you've really done a really good job about synthesizing the data to make sense for your business.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, I'm glad you brought up AI too, because one of the first things I did was implement AI across our organization.
Wow.
Jasper AI has been fantastic for us. And of course, ChatGPT. And one of my favorite things is just building different GPTs within that for specific functions. I built a pain point finder, an account qualification bot that qualifies accounts. And essentially, if you don't give it the variables it needs to make a qualified decision, it will consistently ask for them without giving you an answer. So it's a little fail-proof. Yeah. So, I feel like if an organization is not using AI today, you're just missing out on on some amazing tools. And you can get really smart about it acts somewhat like a data lake in the sense that you can take data from different places, put it into a system, which then, as you defined, converts all of that data into one number that tells you a story.
Do you have any of those GPTs? Are they public? Can we share them with our audience?
I can definitely turn them public. Yeah.
Those sound great. That's literally, it's a way to synthesize all those different data sources. And I'm envisioning giving that to a sales rep and just being like, hey, here's all that data that you're getting from this provider and that provider, put it in here. And here's how you can plan to follow up with said account.
Yeah, definitely. And it still needs works. It needs some tweaks. It's hard to
Always.
yeah. And sometimes the bots kind of mess up because you give them a
Yeah.
definition and it decides to change how that definition really is. So you certainly can't, it's never going to be like fail proof with AI. You always have to look at your answer to determine whether it's real, especially based on the information you're giving it. But it's so helpful and it speeds so many things up. But happy to share those too.
Awesome.
This feels like such a full circle moment because you sort of created your own magic wand mind reader tool by coming in with some of these AI tools to solve that problem. So kudos to you. This has been an amazing conversation. I know our audience will get so much out of it. Before we go, can you tell them where they can reach you?
Yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn under Richard Grant. And if you search the company ITJ, you'll certainly find me. You can also just reach me on email. Feel free to reach out. It's richard.grant@itj.com. I'd be happy to field any questions that are thrown my way.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Direct with Corrina and Taylor.
If you enjoyed what you heard in today's episode, please give us a follow, maybe even a 5-star review, wherever you listen to your podcast.
And if you know someone that you'd like to spotlight, if you want to share your own story, visit us at motionagency.io/direct. We'd love to hear from you.